Right, Neil, I'm going to press the start button now.
Okay.
And hopefully we're all started. Hello, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Neil, Dr. Neil Bindemann. Do you know, I don't think I've asked you how you pronounce his surname. Sorry, God.
That's all right. That's all right.
Start off by getting something wrong.
No, you were about to get it right. It's Bindemann.
It is.
Yeah.
Right. So today we're going to talk about the keto diet. I'm sure that so many of you will have heard about it before. It definitely seems to come up in diet books and all of those things. And as you probably, well, hopefully you know at Talk Health, we're not into the word diet. That's not, we're trying to understand what a healthy diet, as in food planning, is about. And I just thought this was an appropriate time to get Neil to explain to us what actually he's talking about and really understand not only just the science, because I know, Neil, you very kindly said you'll touch on the science, but understand what the benefits to us generally, and I know one of those big benefits is the brain health that you've mentioned. And where I'd like to start, Neil, if I may, is if you could do an introduction to yourself and your own story as to how you got involved in looking towards a keto diet for your own personal health background.
Yeah, of course. Well, I actually, interestingly, through work, I became interested and involved in the ketogenic diet really from a neurological perspective, because I was working on a project to do with epilepsy. And so I had known for quite a while of the diet, and then within the world of epilepsy, it's now known as a useful treatment for what's known as intractable epilepsy, especially in children. That's where the seizures are not controlled by the drugs, by the drug treatments, and so they should be offered the opportunity to go on the diet, and that is what we'd call a medical ketogenic diet or ketogenic therapy. And so I became involved in a very interesting project around quality of life concerning going on the diet and the perceptions that there were in relation to healthcare professionals looking at the diet or perhaps advising on the diet, and also getting perceptions from patients. But it was during that project that I ended up actually in hospital, because I ironically started to get a number of neurological symptoms, having been working in the neurology scene with the Primary Care Community Neurology Society since 2004, which is when I actually set it up. And to keep the story short, basically those symptoms ended up with me going in for a scan at King's, at which point I was immediately whipped into hospital to have an operation for a growth in the brain. I call it a growth in the brain at this stage because I didn't know what it was. Nobody knew. I had a scan. It showed something in the brain. It turned out that I had what's known as a pineocytoma. So that's a brain tumor on the pineal gland, which is right in the center of the brain. And so I had that operation, came out of hospital. That tumor I still have. It is known as a benign tumor, which unfortunately is not the good name for it in that sense, because there's a big misunderstanding that the word benign makes it sound as if it's not dangerous, but benign means it still grows, and anything that's benign in the brain is still dangerous. So that was back in 2015 when that happened. 2017, I had ongoing scans. I had regular scans for a while, and I got the news that it was still growing. And it was from then that I decided, let's look at the diet, because I thought about my own situation in terms of what I'd been eating. So first year out of the hospital, from 2015 to 2016, I kind of kept my diet relatively healthy, and I was always healthy in terms of what I was eating. But the following year, I could sense that I was beginning to eat more carbohydrate. I was eating more croissants, going out for a coffee, as you do.
Yeah.
Um, and I just gradually felt that I'd been eating more. So when I got that message that the tumor was still growing, I thought to myself, I wonder whether it's got anything to do with that as well. And so I decided that going on that diet was something I got nothing to lose. So
Mhm.
I then started to follow it, and I knew of some of the developing research and science behind looking at the diet in brain tumors. The jury is still out from that perspective, and I'll maybe mention that a bit later as well in terms of the evidence around the diet in tumors. But I just thought I will give this a go. And for me, it wasn't just the diet per se, it was probably placing what I was doing with that diet in taking over an element of control for myself.
Yeah.
As many people will know, when they get a serious illness like that, there is a loss of control. There is a sense of feeling of loss of control. And so for me, it felt like I was taking an element of that control back into my life, and that was important. And so I went on that, combined that with eating certain others also are useful when it comes to sort of cancer or tumors. I wouldn't call mine. This is another one. I don't have cancer. So the cancer is basically when the tumor is malignant. I have a benign brain tumor, which is not cancer in that sense that most people. So just to hopefully explain that. But so I was eating plenty of broccoli, which people know is a healthy food. I'd do that, and I would eat other things to go alongside the keto element of the diet. But also, it was about making sure that I was doing other things to take over that sense of control and help
Mm.
myself from a mental fitness perspective, I suppose is the word I use.
And I suppose all these type of diets is I completely agree with you about the control, because it's very bewildering. And if you feel that you can gain some control yourself, that gives you more, I believe, inner strength, doesn't it? And it's
Absolutely.
interesting is that I think with diet, it's interesting that you're thinking about diet specifically for the brain tumor, but it's also looking at how can you the rest of your body be as strong as possible to fight whatever it has to.
Well, it's not just your body, it's your mind.
Yes.
So, it's making sure that you are both physically and mentally fit as well. So yes, what you're eating is important, but it's about positioning it almost in I'd use the word lifestyle um, as well. It's positioning it in the sense of the lifestyle that you are leading, or you wish to lead, or you think you should lead. So therefore, it's not just purely diet
Mm,
in that sense. So you're positioning it in a bigger picture.
yeah. So I know, Neil, and this is a first for us. We've got some slides to look at, so let's hope
Yeah.
those work well. But I don't. Is it worth? And I don't know if you cover this specifically in your slides. Is to just say what the basic elements of the keto diet are, so that people are clear.
Absolutely. So the basic elements are it is it's introducing more fat into your diet, um, and it is bringing down your carbohydrate level, bringing that down to I use a sort of a rough figure of around about 40 grams of carbohydrate and moderate protein levels as well. So in terms of the types of foods, obviously you're looking at the fats, the types of fats that you get. So avocados, in that sense for that food, coconut, as a lot of people hear, coconut oil, coconut milk, as well. So that's another very good fat. Olive oil. And then in terms of the vegetables, we were talking about this just before we came on line. There's a lot of slightly misunderstanding on certain vegetables that, for example, root vegetables. There's a lot more carbohydrate in root vegetables than people realize until they start looking. When you start following the diet, you start to look a little bit more about what's in the foods, because you start to become more aware of the amount of carbohydrate that you need to have, or you shouldn't be having in that sense. So carrots, again, much higher in carbs than people realize. Parsnips, the same. Then you've got the starchy vegetables like potatoes. We can't do that, but you can have celeriac instead of potatoes. So celeriac is a good alternative to the potato. And then looking at what you can do to keep the carbs down, in terms of what can you do to substitute for carbohydrate. So rice, for example, you can now get mixtures of broccoli and cauliflower rice.
We had cauliflower rice yesterday actually, and I was really surprised at how nice it was, but also really, I know it sounds ridiculous, but it made you chomp a lot. It made you were eating for quite a while through it, rather than just something that you can quickly eat and it's gone.
Yes, and the interesting thing about that, of course, is that the eating process burns up energy. So the more you're having to eat, the more you're having to do work-wise with that, you are going to lose more energy out of your system too, which is a good thing. So yeah, they're the key elements. And as I sort of said on I think on Twitter, was that think about the diet from a point of view of adding something in rather than taking something away. It might help you to follow the diet more, that you are actually adding. And then, of course, when you're eating, you need to have a balance. So by adding something in extra, you obviously need to take something away to ensure you've got the balance. That's what happens when you add the fats in, and the fat is going to give you a lot of benefits, and I'll show that in the slides. And then, of course, you then have to cut the carbs down.
And then I think that's a really good way when you're looking at changing your dietary habits, or rather than we're so into everything being a takeaway. Everything is, sorry, I don't mean takeaways of the food, but you're depriving yourself of something. Well, I'm depriving myself of cake or all the standard stuff, as opposed to saying, well, actually, I'm adding into my diet, which is a far more positive way to look at the foods that you might be introducing.
Yes, absolutely. No, I think it's helpful to do that, I think.
Okay, then shall we roll the images?
Yeah, I will go through the slides. Hold on a second, I just need to put them up.
I just want to say, although there's a note gone out, please do, if you've got any questions, and I think maybe Neil's slideshow will prompt for some questions, please do put them in the Q&A, which we'll run at the end of the session as well.
Okay, I'm going to share my desktop, so you'll appear on my desktop, I think, for a second, whilst I just so my slides showing now. I hope so.
I can see them.
Great. Okay, so just let me put them onto. Oops, if I can just. There we go. That's it. Okay, so I've actually titled this talk, why buildings collapse and their relevance to the ketogenic diet. Can you see now? What are you seeing? Are you seeing?
I'm seeing both.
You're seeing both slides. Okay. Let me see if I can.
Make sure you haven't got some bad notes there by mistake.
I haven't got any notes whatsoever. I'm just going to leave it like that so people can see. It doesn't matter. I don't mind. So basically, what is the relevance to this? The first thing is that to talk about why buildings collapse, and I will do that with this one. 5 reasons written there why the buildings collapse. And as Anthony Hopkins has said, if you look closely enough, you'll find that everything has a weak spot where it can break sooner or later. So, oops, that's giving the answer away, but never mind. So what's the common factor that causes the weak spot to emerge? Well, it's clearly it is stress. In terms of those, but when you have an earthquake or whatever, that earthquake is going to look for the stress points, and then buildings collapse. So stress being either from a physical or a mental perspective. Mental, we're going through a lot of at the moment in terms of COVID, clearly. But so when chronic stress continues abated, in my view, it's likely that everyone's weak spot will emerge in a physical or mental form. And that's just something that I put down myself, thinking it all through. So what is the relevance of stress to what I want to say? Is stress exploiting a weak spot in people who may have increased susceptibility? Well, increased susceptibility in the diet world, in that sense, perhaps is this, that we're led towards more sugary foods. We're led towards foods that look really nice, pleasing on the eye. You know, it's amazing how we actually go about creating beautifully looking foods for us to then eat. That, to a certain degree, is saying there is a very hidden power within sugar. That sugar is driving our behavior to do this, make these lovely looking cakes. And this is an interesting, some points here. You know, this comes from a Scientific American publication, that under acute stress, the brain requires 12% more energy. So we need that. Stress brains perform less effectively prior to eating, therefore driving a desire to eat food that replenishes the glucose of the brain. But this last point is fascinating, that studies suggest people who experience a lot of stress in childhood have a stronger preference for sweet foods later in life.
Is that because you get comfort? It gives us comfort.
I think there's a lot of, yes, there is. It's the comfort, it's the joy. And as I say, you've just sort of coming on to this point. Does coping with stress drive a desire for pleasure? Well, the evidence suggests that actually it is doing that through the science, through the neuroscience, that daily binging on sugar repeatedly releases dopamine, which is one of the neurochemicals in the brain that people will have heard of. And that dopamine enhances the expectation of pleasure in humans. So you're right, you know, the neuroscience is there to demonstrate what's going on. And in terms of stress and glucose, the stress has an impact on the glucose metabolism as well. It actually can make matters worse from point of view of the amount of glucose we end up within the system. And you also get glucocorticoids that are released, which are stress-related hormone molecules that cause damage as well. And of course, this is interesting. Bench to bedside review here. This is around glucose and stress conditions in the intensive care unit. Intensive care units are very much in the headlines at the moment, and many people are in there. So again, the stress associated with that is having an impact on the way we metabolize the foods and what gets released, etc. So it's about ways to try and replace the sugar and glucose. Here's a nice picture, looks appealing, looks attractive, but it's not sugar. It's part of the ketogenic diet. And so it's trying to think through how to keep your foods looking appealing and attractive as well in terms of where you're doing it. But it's also about looking at an alternative fuel source that is available through the foods that we're eating. And that's where this concept that I mentioned it about the importance of fat, bringing fat into the diet, because fat is what is producing the ketones for the ketogenic diet. The fat digestion or fat metabolism is driving the production of ketones. And this is why it's used within epilepsy, because it's shown now that the ketogenic diet through the production of the ketone bodies can actually have what's known as an anti-seizure effect, i.e. preventing or trying to reduce the number of seizures. And in addition to that, in terms of the brain health, that fat digestion is important and involved in neuropeptide production as well. So just to quickly put that in context, this is an anatomy of a neuron. So let's try and explain. You've got the cell body of the neuron. Now, cell bodies can sometimes they'll be within the spinal cord, or they'll be in the brain, or they'll just be just outside the spinal cord. Then the axon, which is the big nerve fiber where the impulses get sent through, that goes all the way out to the synapse. So, for example, on my hand, I'll have nerves. On my feet, they're all around. So the axons are at the far end. So the neurotransmitters versus the neuropeptide difference is important here. Neurotransmitters are actually produced locally in the synapse. That's where you get more, whereas neuropeptides get produced more in the cell body and get transported backwards and forwards along the axons and then get released. The difference is also that neuropeptides tend to be more involved in communication with other cell types in the body or other organs. So you get a neuropeptides, for example, that will interact with the immune cells and some of the cells involved there. So they have, whereas neurotransmitters tend to be, they are focused around the chemical messaging within the nervous system generally. So, and so the synapse is where the neurotransmitters get released and then allow the messaging to carry on down the axons. Neurotransmitters such as serotonin, acetylcholine, they're examples. Examples of neuropeptides are one which I'm just about to come to, which is neuropeptide Y. So this paper demonstrates that fats are important in the release of neuropeptide Y, and then neuropeptide Y has been shown to have impact on preventing activity. So adding fats in are very beneficial from that perspective. But what happens when stress is added to the whole aspect of fat metabolism? When stress is added in to glucose, in terms of the glucose metabolism, it tends to cause a problem. The glucose metabolism aspects that with stress is in, it could make matters worse, because in epilepsy, it's the glucose metabolism. Something's gone wrong within that glucose metabolism. So in stress, we get this response which involves the brain and the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the release of ACTH, which eventually leads to the production of cortisol, which is the stress hormone that most people all have heard of. And cortisol, one of the key stress components of cortisol is glucocorticoids. I'm trying to speed this through quickly. So glucocorticoid is linked to cortisol. And what happens with fat metabolism is we are seeing that the fat cells have a receptor for glucocorticoid, and it's almost as if the fat cells are removing the glucocorticoid from the system, and they're helping to control the stress. So bringing fat into your body is actually helpful from a point of view of managing the stress response as well. We also know that the actual ketone bodies that are produced by metabolizing fat are also important in terms of stress response as well. Plus, the ketogenic diet is important. It also has a link with inflammation. So in that, we know that inflammation is linked to stress. We know that through some of the genetics, and we also know that the ketogenic diet has an anti-inflammatory properties as well. Just coming towards quickly towards the end of what I want to show you here is this link between ketogenic diet and cancer. And I said the jury's out on this, it's well worth looking at this paper on cancer and the ketogenic diet, current perspective in Neurodigest, and it gives a good review of some of the issues out there. So it's worth looking at. And the reason why the ketogenic diet and cancer, it's not conclusive, is because we know that cancer cells are very clever in adapting how they can metabolize and how they can generate their fuels. So there's a lot more evidence, there's a lot of need to find the evidence, i.e. there's a lot more need to get research done. And one of the things I was involved with 2 years ago now was to call for more funding into research into the ketogenic diet within the world of brain tumors. And we definitely need that to be happening.
That was actually one of the things I was going to ask, but when you mentioned it earlier about there isn't loads of evidence, is the evidence because there hasn't been enough research done into all the different factors? Because it's interesting that you mentioned about inflammation. So, you know, so many of the chronic conditions are that we, you know, look at and talk health and our members is very much based around inflammation, whether it be gut health, whether it be skin, psoriasis and all those things. So presumably it's just that there hasn't been enough research done to prove
that's it. You know, it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation when it comes to that. There definitely needs more funding to go into it's not just the ketogenic diet. For me, it's about, we need more research into looking at foods per se and what we eat and how we metabolize it and how we produce the products that we produce within our system. When you think about a lot of the pharmaceutical products that are out there, they actually come from plants. They are derived from a lot of plants. Now, if that is the case, if we spent the same amount of money understanding and trying to research how we as humans metabolize different foods, different plants, etc., we might actually discover that the human body is capable of manufacturing products as part of our whole metabolism that will benefit us, like a pharmaceutical drug gets produced. You know, so that there is a lot of work that needs to be done in that whole field, and dietitians and nutritionists need to be drawn into the world of research to do more. So, but just to finish off, because I'm nearly finished with this part, just to quickly say that the diet definitely has benefits when it comes to function, and this is a paper to demonstrate that cognitive functioning, i.e. how we think and process, how we do things, is improved. I noticed it when I went on, that my mental clarity was improved as a result of being on the diet. So it's definitely, there's a lot out there. That's kind of it's just the tip of the iceberg, basically, of what I've touched on there. But one of the things I just want to finish on to say that what we can look at, of course, is to look at how do we minimize the impact of the stressor. Now, some buildings remain upright when it comes to an earthquake. The reason why that is, perhaps they're better built. They are constructed in a way that keeps them physically fit to deal with the stress. And there's an element of that that needs to be applied to us as humans, that we need to be better prepared for certain things. And that comes down to looking at issues relating to the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. The conscious is the tip of the iceberg. The subconscious is what's all underneath. And therefore, if we have a subconscious and a conscious mind, we have conscious stress and we have subconscious stress. So it's looking at how can we, dealing with conscious stress is probably easier, and there's probably ways in which we can manage that more effectively. It's the subconscious stress that's a bit more difficult. And that's why things like mindfulness, hypnotherapy, all these areas are really helpful, because they get into some of the subconscious elements. So I hope that's been, as a whistle-stop tour through some of the things. If anybody was interested in following me on Twitter, that's my hashtag, and Binder's Twitter. I put an R in there. There isn't an R in my surname, but I just put an R in the Binders, but never mind. But yeah, I hope that was useful.
No, that's fascinating, and it's interesting that lots of people talk about brain fog, and one of the things of giving up sugar is the clarity. Um, Theoretically, that your brain. I've obviously given up sugar so far for the year. Fingers crossed, I'm doing okay, and I'm just waiting to get some more brain power. But it is interesting. So that sort of all relates to everything that you were talking about as well.
Yeah, and the other aspect of the ketogenic diet that I noticed is most people will be aware of what they call the paleo dip. That is after you've had your lunch quite often during the day, about half an hour, 45 minutes afterwards, you suddenly feel a bit sleepy. That's your postprandial dip. On the ketogenic diet, you don't get that. You're on a level keel playing field all the way through the day. So actually, you become probably a bit more productive as a result of being on that. It's because the postprandial dip is linked to the carbohydrate breakdown and the digestion of the carbohydrates.
I was just going to actually, because I know we're now going to do a quick session on practicalities of eating and what you put in your diet or out. But the other thing I'm interested in is what are the benefits, because it's all very well saying we should be doing this, but it's really nice to know what so you've given us the scientific benefits of how the neuros work, etc.
Yeah.
But for the layperson like me, what's it going to give me? I think specifically it's more interesting to hear from someone like yourself who is on the ketogenic diet, and if you can remember now how you were before and the benefits you have now.
Well, absolutely. Well, obviously I did lose a bit of weight, but that wasn't the reason for doing it. I could say I probably could benefit from losing a bit of weight back then as well, just a little bit. But yeah, so that was something I noticed. But it was definitely in the mental processing that I just found I was sharper. To say I was able to do things through the day more productively. I found it once I got into a routine of the way I would eat. I have found following the diet fairly straightforward. That's what you sometimes hear as well. Is how easy is it to follow? From a medical ketogenic diet, then you need to be probably a lot more strict when it comes to the amount of carbohydrate. But if you're not doing it for example, for epilepsy or maybe a brain tumor, but you're doing it for other issues, then think about it from a point of view going into it more gradually. So don't suddenly drop your amount of carbohydrate down from, I don't know, let's say 80 grams of carbohydrate down to 40. We're having to cut it in half. That becomes difficult. I think I said this to you the other day. It's like the analogy of climbing a mountain. It depends on where your starting point is to get to. If in terms of your diet, you're starting halfway up the mountain, i.e. you're already following a fairly healthy diet, it's going to be easier for you to get to the top of that mountain. Whereas if you're starting right down the bottom, where you've got maybe a lot more changes to make it possible to get up there, then do it in small steps. You'll get to there if you just take your time and do it in small steps to get to the top of the mountain. You'll do it. And also, as I said at the beginning, think about it from a perspective of adding something into your diet that's going to be causing you benefits. So you'll want to do that to gain those benefits. And therefore, by doing that, you'll want to bring down the carbohydrate to ensure the balance. You don't want to increase your carbohydrate and your fats. That's not going to be good for you. You want to have your fats and you want to bring down your carbohydrates.
And I think the advice that you've offered is very much for any form of change of diet that people do. It's more about, and I think what we're seeing more and more, people are saying about diet, it's more about your lifestyle. And this isn't a diet from 1 to 5 weeks, 6 weeks or whatever. This is actually, you're looking to change your lifestyle for a long period. So there's no massive hurry to drop things. It's to be able to start changing the habit, the way you look at what you're going to eat, how you buy your food. So you suddenly realize you stop buying certain standard foods, and
That's right.
and there's no massive hurry. If week by week you're incorporating the new lifestyle, which is going to last you a whole lifetime.
Yeah, with the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine, where I do some work, we have a campaign called #OneChange. Now, that is all about making one change to your lifestyle. And it's much easier to look at health behavior change in a gradual step. So think about your one change that you think you could make, and maybe do it at a month at a time. Or if you're finding that difficult, a quarter at a time, i.e. with it once in the 3 months. And make those changes gradual.
Definitely. Now, if anybody would like to add some questions, please feel free to do so now, because I'm just going to ask Neil about practical recipes or things that you eat. And then if you'd like to anyone ask some questions, please do so now. Okay. So so what does a normal day look like? Is there a normal diet or a day?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So my breakfast is I make a porridge type mix, which is primarily flaxseed, milled linseeds. Then I mix that with desiccated coconut as well. So and then some ground almonds. That's all mixed in together. I'll have that with a mixture of milk and heat up with and some water in there. Then I have a maple syrup replacement that I can get, which I'll have with that porridge. An alternative breakfast is going to be use eggs. So poached egg, fried egg, bacon, avocado. That's quite nice. Put some seeds, nuts on that. Fish. Some people will have especially up in Scotland, will have fish and breakfast.
Peppery or something.
Yeah.
Peppery for breakfast, though.
I'm not sure about that, but yes. Kippers. That's one of the things in Scotland. Kippers, I love. So, and then at lunchtime, lunch can be you can get low carb sort of crisp breads now. You can buy those. So I'll have that with cheese. And this is a good thing, is think about cheese. Loads of different cheeses. You can have that. You've got cheese which got more. Some have got more fat in them than others. One thing that I was quite surprised by, I didn't realize it until I started looking into it, was the amount of protein that's in cheese. You think when you're buying cheeses you're buying a lot of fat.
Yeah.
You have a look next time you're going to buy cheese. Have a look and look at how much protein is in the cheese. It's quite surprising.
And so, do different cheeses then have different protein percentages?
Yeah, they will. They'll depend. Some of the harder cheeses have probably got more protein in them. The softer cheeses have got more fat in them, which is probably what makes them like that, I imagine. I'll have that. I'll have celery at lunchtime with that. You can buy products from a lot of supermarkets now have got certain low carb products as well. You can get almond spreads.
Yeah,
they're low carb. As I say, then at sort of tea time, you've got cauliflower rice that you can do a really nice rice dish with that. I'm just trying to think through I'll have a lot of broccoli Broccoli, no,
So you're
a good
still
soup.
eating broccoli then?
Oh, I love it. Um, Broccoli's got a very good nutrient in it, which is very good for it's sort of there's some evidence that it's got anti-cancer properties in it.
Mm,
But a good soup to make, broccoli and blue cheese soup,
mm,
really nice. It's really easy to have, and you could have that at lunch. You could have that whenever you want to.
mm,
Uh, and then you can make different breads yourself. I'm making a bread which is out of a lot of linseed. I use that. You can buy online. You can buy bread powders that you can already prepared, like alternative flour to use to make bread. So it's amazing how it's changed in the last excuse me in the last 2 years, 3 years.
amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
It's
So,
much easier.
and do you still eat red meat?
Oh yes, yeah. No, I am somebody who likes a balance. So I'll eat meats, I'll eat fish. People can do the ketogenic diet either primarily meat based, or they can do ketogenic diet if they are vegan or vegetarian. You
Mm,
know, I'm somebody who just likes a bit of both. I don't eat too much red meat,
no.
uh, just because from the guidelines it says don't eat too much red meat anyway. But I enjoy having a steak now and again. I'll obviously have chicken as well, but I don't do that because that's processed. Again, avoid the processed meats, processed foods. But yeah,
But having a varied diet, A, is good for you, but B, it allows you to stick to something. If you are, I mean, quite often we have, we all quite often have the same breakfast, for example, don't we? So there's certain meals that we're quite happy to have the same thing, but you can't have the same thing for every meal. And that's where I think variety is important.
absolutely, it is. It's important for the body as well to have variety in the foods that you're eating. But quite often, it's about convenience too for many people. So, especially breakfasts, it's generally, I would say, for convenience that they can have a quick breakfast to get out the door. That's why I create the porridge that I have, and I prepare that a week in advance. So
Wow.
I, I make a mix up, and then I portion it out. So I just have a portion a day, and I know how much I've got to put in. I get these the plastic pots that you get pate in sometimes and things like that. Well, I reuse those. I keep those, and they're ideal for putting my mix into.
Mm.
I'll mix.
So we've
uh,
got a few questions, but I've just got to ask one more. I've got to ask a question myself. Is that, do your family follow the diet with you? So does your wife follow the diet?
No, no, they don't. They don't follow it specifically like me, but they don't have a massive amount of carbohydrate. They are probably they follow a more standard diet in that sense,
Yeah.
really.
But none of us should be eating loads of carbohydrate. You know,
No,
that's sort of good,
absolutely.
healthy living. Anyway, so I'm going to just have a quick look. So I put my glasses on. Right. Oh no, somebody's asked out another word. Are sweeteners like xylitol a good
Yeah.
substitute on this
Dietol.
diet?
Yes, you can use. So there are certain sweeteners that are better than others. I use, I think, Trivia, which you can buy from a lot of supermarkets. I think that
Oh yeah,
might
I've seen that.
that might be a xylitol equivalent. I'm not sure. It's stevia, which is a good one because it's a plant extract, and that's a good alternative. So there's some good websites out there to look at. So dietdoctor.com is well worth having a look at. And that will give you a lot of helpful advice when it comes to the different sweeteners to look for, because there are some sweeteners you'd want to avoid, and I can't remember off the top of my head which ones they are.
Yeah. Okay. How much protein should you have a day?
Good question. I can't remember off the top of my head.
No,
But it's
it's not big.
usually it's not massive, but you can have a moderate amount of protein. You don't have to cut your protein down significantly in terms of the amount of protein that you would have probably in a normal diet is probably what you would have anyway. It's looking at it from I think from the other perspective, it's the fats versus the carbs. Bring in the fats and reduce the carbs.
I mean, and obviously some diets are very much protein based, aren't they? But I think you have to be careful if you're following a protein based diet. That's something that you quite generally have to talk to a doctor about it as to whether your body can accept it.
Absolutely, because of the potential impact on things like kidney function. You don't want to have a very high level of protein because you can cause kidney issues with that. So again, I would suggest it's have a look online. There's plenty of information. Diet Doctor again is well worth looking at from that perspective.
And
Yeah.
I think also if you're not sure about diets as well, I mean, we always say go to your doctor, but really the people to go and talk to are dietitians. They're the ones that really understand how food can affect you, and they're very not averse, they're very au fait with diets with chronic conditions. They do understand the impact, possibly more than the doctor.
The dietitian is definitely a good place to start. You could, again, the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine is a good starting point as well to look for, because there are lifestyle medicine doctors. There are increasing number of lifestyle medicine doctors, and they're GPs. A lot of the GPs are getting trained up in that because
and we've done quite a bit with that.
They realise that they're not getting enough nutritional education as part of their medical training.
Yes, and we've worked with a company called Heartwood, and that's very much around the nutritional benefits and remedies and things like that are natural to support conventional medicine, and that's what I would say, that it's very much they go hand in hand. And last question, will this help with stomach pains? Mine get that bad but not able to do anything. Because that's inflammation again, isn't it, possibly?
Yeah, it would depend on what's triggering the.
Yeah.
We look at the issues of stomach pains, because stomach pains can happen for all sorts of reasons. So yeah, it would depend. The stomach complaints could be stress related. The stomach pains could be dietary related in terms of the foods that they're eating. Certainly, if you follow a ketogenic diet, but you don't have to ketogenic diet to follow a healthier diet to address the stomach problems.
Okay. Okay. And I'm just very much aware of time. Just looking at the last one, do you know if any alternative flours that are good to use apart from nut ones?
Say again. So I missed that. Alternative what?
Alternative flours that are used to use apart from nut ones.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose that coconut, almond. Oh yes, sesame seeds. You can get sesame seed flours. You can. So a little trick with creating a flour alternative.
You're now a baker, aren't you?
I quite enjoy it actually. If you have one of these coffee grinders, I don't know if the little coffee grinders where you put coffee beans into, you push your lid on and you push it down and it will whir around. My wife bought me one of those several years ago for my coffee, but it's become a grinder for my linseeds.
Oh.
And also for sunflowers as well. So put linseeds into a coffee grinder, grind them down, and it creates almost like ground almonds, but it becomes really, really useful, really good. So I've tried it with pumpkin seeds. Pumpkin seeds, when they are milled or ground in that, they're just slightly heavier because there's a little bit more moisture in the fluid in them, so they don't work so well. Whereas linseeds and sunflowers, when they're ground milled in the coffee grinder, they work a treat. So And the linseed is a really, really good seed from a point of view of health benefits.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's very. I mean, I didn't know that we were going into a cookery kind of lesson, but that's really useful to know. But it's really important, isn't it? It's all very well known, all the benefits, but as with all forms of diets, how does it work in practice? You know, and you see so many diets which are about, oh, you need to buy this, you need to buy that, especially if they're American based. We don't have those ingredients in our supermarkets, and particularly at the moment when we can't get to supermarkets or go to individual delicatessens or whichever it is, it's quite hard. So it's good to know that using standard type of foods will allow us to follow the ketogenic diet if we felt that would, is something for us.
The way to look at it, I'm actually looking at a little venture later, hopefully later this year, where we're going to be creating something called the Keto Deli.
Oh.
All right. If you just think of a standard deli, you're walking into a delicatessen. If you were to remove the cakes that are from there and all the kind of the high carb end aspect of a deli and kept everything else, most of that I can eat. There's a lot of really nice foods that I can eat from a deli. The meats, for example, the fish, certain vegetables, certain seeds, certain nuts, coffee. It's not difficult in that sense. I just want to try and package it in a way that makes it easier for people to be able to do it. So that's what I'm working on for something hopefully later this year.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much for your time, Neil. As always, it's so interesting talking to you. And, we all wish you very well with your own personal health.
Thank you.
I'm sure if you keep up the diet, I mean, it sounds like it's doing the trick.
Fingers crossed.
Thank you everyone for joining us as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.